And so when I think of letting go, it's really heart opening. It's an energetic release.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Webdelics podcast, where we're on a journey to find out the truth about plant medicines and psychedelics, get rid of the myths, and change the narrative. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and with us today is a very special guest, and I have to admit, one of my very favorite people, Gretchen Jones. Gretchen, tell us all about yourself.
Oh, Scott, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
My current iteration of identity is I'm a strategic business advisor for creative entrepreneurs, which pretty much means I kind of blend a private board member with a business coach or management consultant with a little bit of the emotional. I'm not a therapist, not certainly not licensed, but the emotional experience of creativity and entrepreneurialism definitely blend in. So those three things kind of work into my process with my clients, and I work with people in a myriad of mediums, from fashion, which is a part of my old background. You might know me from Project Runway. I also am in an inductee of Gen Art's Fresh Faces in Fashion. But I also work with people in fine art, music, all the other kinds of design, the wedding industry, film and TV, writing. It's all over the place because in a sense, we're not as unique as we would like to think we are, and also we're all beautifully special. And so the tethers that bring us together are actually far greater than you'd think.
What a beautiful and comprehensive self description. I absolutely love it. Although you just bursted my bubble, I thought I was totally special. Okay, I'm going to have to go into therapy now, but I won't go to you because I know that's not what you do, and I'm not a therapist either. I have to also say this. Not only were you on Project Runway, you just weren't someone in the background. Is it not true that you won your season?
I did. Many moons ago. Back in 2010, I was the winner of season 8.
I love it. Well, it is so good to have you on the show. And the topic we're going to focus on today is one of the most interesting ones, in my opinion, that we have discussed yet, which is how psychedelics and plant medicines can help you learn to let go. And Gretchen, I'm starting to spin out of control even thinking about that. Am I someone that anyone wants to just let go? What do you mean or what are the words learning to let go? What does that mean to you?
Oh my goodness. I think the most succinct way to put it is to set yourself free. Um, Letting go in my therapy, which is interesting, after plant medicine, I'm starting to literally let go. But when I talk about things that are difficult or belief systems that have been ingrained around how things are supposed to work, I tend to be holding on or very closed. And so when I think of letting go, it's really heart opening. It's an energetic release. And it's about being more like creating space for presence.
I have to say, that's something that I struggle with. I suspect, based on your professional history, but correct me if I'm wrong, that you at least have had at some point in your life a tendency to be ambitious, to be driven, maybe even to be accused of being hard driving. And I say that without judgment because those words have been uttered about me, both behind my back and to my face. And when at least I live in that personality space, I ain't letting go of anything. My MO too often has been in life has been, okay, this obstacle is in my way. This is what my goal is. Let me turn into a human bulldozer and ram my agenda through. Does any of that speak to you? Because I know a lot of very successful people are like that. It's not just me. Maybe it is just me, but I don't think it is.
I doubt it. Yeah, it does resonate. I'm starting to learn that it's been more. Certainly, I can only speak for my own experience, but a lot of my ambition or like the achiever in me I think has really been coming from a state of survival mode
Mm,
where it was attached to a way or a mode of getting somewhere that I would consider safer,
mhm.
or where opportunity would be. And over time, what I've come to realize is that I'm really, the beauty of being ambitious. And dare I say, you can be ambitious and not talented or not resilient or have the grit to achieve. To really be able to achieve to me is there's an element of it where I've come to realize that I'm a manifester, but in a way where I can manifest things that are good for me
Mm.
and bad for me. Like the way I like to talk about it is you can choke things to death, but I believe you can choke things to life as well.
Wow. Fascinating. Before we get into that, and I'm not going to let this idea of choking things to life go, because don't
Hello.
you and I both have a little bit of martial arts in our background?
Yes, we
Yes, we
do.
do. Jujitsu. Yes, we'll say it out loud. But before we get into that, we will talk a little bit about what you referenced a minute ago concerning existing in a survival mode or centering
Mm,
yourself around what's safe, because it's actually a theme that has come up consistently within this show, particularly with regards to those who are drawn into the plant medicine world due
mm,
to trauma. In fact, it came up very recently in the episode with Dan Carcillo, who talked about his own hazing and trauma that he went through as a professional hockey player, leading to him being in this protective, defensive state all the time. Is that what you're
mhm.
talking about? And if so, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how that originated with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally resonates. I grew up in a pretty, um, I'd say like casually radical environment. It's not like I grew up in like crazy, hippy dippy stuff, but my parents they were more drug, sex, and rock and roll folk. And so when I was a child, a lot of what I'm working with now because of the medicines is really the difference between abuse and neglect, and that there's a range of behaviors that can be all very traumatizing and negative, but come from different spaces.
Mm.
And so, um, being in survival mode or from a place of scarcity, even the last journey that I went on, a lot of what came up was I need to nourish myself. I don't need to be in a consistent the belief system that I'm always um, malnourished in whatever capacity that could be, has really been a part of the journey of like what it means to like the striving, trying to get somewhere where I could feel safe, um, was more about needing to be fed, be that spiritually fed, be that compassionate witnessing, be that actual care and affection and food or shelter or whatever it might be.
Mm.
Operating from a place as a child of being in a pretty wild, sometimes reckless environment, safety was my main concern. And I think as I've gotten older, that concern has really limited my ability to be present enough to allow for serendipity
Mm.
or even just a level of presence that creates space to be like actually alive, like
Mhm.
alive, living. Because when you're always stuck in survival mode, you're grinding in a way that really removes the self from, I think, like our actual bodies, but also the circumstances around us.
One of the things that you're pointing to is something that we've never explicitly discussed on this show, but hearing you talk about it shows up to me as something that's behind the scenes that you really put a fine pinpoint on. We have talked before on multiple occasions about how abuse, trauma, neglect, all of these things that happen in our upbringing, if we are from homes that were less dysfunctional, or I'm sorry, less than dysfunctional, uh, really creating this drive to operate within fear, operate without a mindset that's geared towards abundance and possibility. But why? Why does that happen? And what I'm hearing you just say actually goes us to that. You're talking about nourishment, spiritual, emotional nourishment, that the chaos that those of us who grew up in these sort of atmospheres had to endure, on the one hand, forces us to be active and expend energy in a certain way, whether it's purely in terms of defense or seeking safety.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time that we're expending energy, we are not getting nourishment to replace us. And that, to
Yes.
me, explains then, from a spiritual perspective and perhaps even from an emotional perspective, where a lot of this mindset comes from, not just as a factual causatory matter, but as a matter of from the psyche.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, drive is almost more like what's coming to mind is kind of battle. Like I talk a lot about, part of this opening or letting go is like taking the armor off.
Mm.
And some of that is like, I have a spiritual chastity belt around me because I'm so concerned about not thriving, but surviving, that taking the armor off is so vulnerable. And then the drive is like going, like everything has to be a fight. And what I'm learning is really be more to allow myself to be more intuitive means I have to remove the armor. And I can't be in battle state. I need to be still but strong. Hence maybe some martial arts work we both did. Like how to quiet the self, and feel, dare I say, naked or vulnerable, but from a place of safety instead of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that to me is the magic, of this moment in my own journey work is having to reclaim how to trust myself, because the only trusting place was with the armor and just trying to fight for that just over that fence, just the grass is going to be greener, I'm going to get to that Eden. And I look back, I've been through so many Edens, but when you're always in battle mode or fight mode, it's hard to recognize your accomplishments, where you are now. And you're stuck in a state where, I don't think you can really be dropped in on a spiritual way where joy and real love and compassion and empathy for yourself first can come from, let alone for others.
But you raise an interesting question. Back before my own journey through counseling, which I've discussed previously on this show, as well as my exploration of plant medicine through this show, I would say to people, joy, happiness, who cares? I have goals, I have ambition, and all this stuff about happiness and joy, why would I even concern myself with that? I want to move ahead. And even listening to you, there is a part of me, the old bad Scott, that might be saying, well, but Gretchen, the armor that you had, the battles that you were constantly prepared to fight, were what got you to the top of the world. I mean, you and I have discussed before in other contexts, and we might as well just raise it now. When you were at the height of your Project Runway fame, as well as in the immediate aftermath of that, you would walk out on the street. Everyone would know who you were. You would, have to sign autographs, I assume, or have this.
At least take pictures.
Yeah, or pictures, exactly. All the sorts of things people strive for their entire life to get. And so how could it be so bad? Why would it make sense to let go of the very things that got you into these situations that anyone would aspire to be in?
It's interesting you say that. That makes me think two things. One is, this kind of goes with the choking things into life. I thought there was an answer The ambition, I'm going to do this, and then things will be okay. Back to that, like the
Mhm.
Eden's just over there. That's never enough isms in a certain way. And there was a treadmill element to it. And I think there was a lot of wish fulfillment that I was hoping
Mhm.
for. And that was holding on to this vision of what was going to be an answer or a fix, or I don't know, an intangible something that I was driving towards. And after that experience, one is like, I can control everything I want. It's not going to take me where, even if I'm doing all of the controlling, it's still not going to take me where I thought I was
Yeah.
going. But also, um, in the like, what is enough factor, especially as Americans in a capitalist society, we're told never, there's not enough. And what I've been working through a lot is, realizing when things aren't right. That's back to like realizing that ambition did get me to everything that I thought I wanted. And then I had to go through the lessons of not everything you want you're going to like. Not everything you want is
Mm.
actually aligned with your life's journey or purpose. And what I've come to really get more comfortable with is, success comes and goes, money comes and goes, joy comes and goes, but so does sorrow, so does pain, so does strife or malnourishment. And I wouldn't have had any of those lessons come to be if I didn't let those massively wild accomplishments I was able to achieve teach me what they were there to teach me, which was not a lifelong career in fashion. It taught me a lot about my hubris and how that's attached to my armor. I've been doing a lot of work around um, Venus and Isis, like, you have to go into the dark in order to come back out. And like, I've just been way more comfortable with, dare I say, the theme of today's chat, like letting go and not holding on for dear life, because life is so much more than that. So it's been interesting. I'm thinking of gratitude differently. I'm so grateful for how my survival mode manifested into channeling my talent to become an achiever and lead me to where I am now. But where I am now was not where I was going. And I'm so, so grateful for where I am today, because it wouldn't have happened without that work. But I don't want to hold on to that. Armor's heavy.
Mm.
And that's a burden of my own making that was very effective. It did everything it needed to do in my childhood and maybe younger adulthood, but it started to hinder my ability to grow and expand. And so I had to say thank you, but no more.
Wow.
And I couldn't have done that without the work that I'm doing right now with plant medicine.
So let's talk before we dive in a little bit more deeply into your plant medicine work. What exactly shifted in your life? What's the story that led you to begin to get involved in the world of plant medicines?
Mm. Well, I grew up in rural Colorado. So I was fortunate enough to not be in an urban environment. So nature was always a part of my grounding space. And that's such a gift. Like, though it was a wild childhood, getting to be, I don't want to say one with nature. I don't know if I was that elevated, but really understand
Mm.
kind of in an intuitive, more animalistic way.
Mm.
The grounding sense of being out in the outdoors has always been with me. And when I was a very young professional, kind of just making my way into fashion or creativity as a modality, I was always very concerned with sustainability. Um, I'm in my early 40s now. So this, like during Y2K isms, there were a lot of um, new documentaries. I'm thinking of The Corporation, that was really coming into asking deeper questions
Mm.
around like, what does mass manufacturing,
Mhm.
globalization, what is that doing to our lived environments, let alone all those creatures, including ourselves, that are living on Mother Earth. And it just was like a lightning bolt that needed to always guide me. And what I've found through my professional trajectory is that has always, that and creativity as a responsibility as much as a mode of communicating, those two things have a lot of they're dutiful things to connect to. So like a values driven path was going to be mine, whether I like it or not. And what I've found is that drive has really helped me discover, and kind of the loss of everything post Project Runway made me really have to reconnect with how much I love being a part of a creative community, how much I actually love having a sense of responsibility around what we produce as creatives and put out into the world, be that from a social, environmental, economic, but also like body, mind, spirit way. Like we are communicators and vessels for change. And what I realized is I actually have a lot more business acumen because I take that that there's a sense of dutifulness or being of service there that kind of helped me discover that where I feel most aligned and most dropped in is in helping creatives navigate this really complicated cement capitalistic like grindy world that's still based on the planet Earth. And that ebb and flow, or that yin yang, there aren't a lot of people that are in the service of helping the community I came from. And I think those were the driving forces that have, every time I'd unpeel another layer or take another veil off, I would still find myself in this space of like wanting to be of service, wanting to serve the community I come from, and encourage radical but soft, positive, but also discomforting disruption. And that's what we need going into the 21st century is support and guidance for those who are doing the deep creative work, but helping them do it in a way that can serve themselves and the greater whole.
I'm a little bit overwhelmed by everything that was packed.
It was a lot. I'm so sorry.
Don't be sorry. I love it. It's going to just involve me unpacking. It's sort of like from a podcast host perspective. You just gave me an entire Christmas morning full of gifts to unwrap. And make no mistake, Ms. Jones, I plan on unwrapping them all. So the gifts you gave me are the gifts I intend to receive and share with this audience. But you said a little snippet in there that I really, from an audience perspective, want to make sure that I pursue, because the audience will be irritated with me if I don't, which is when you said after the fall, after Project Runway, or after the loss you had after Project Runway, I can't let that go. Talk to us a little bit more about what you mean there, so we understand how you got from winning Project Runway to the place where focusing on helping creative folks navigate a business world in a way that's sustainable emerges as your mission. And then we're going to tie all that back into plant medicine, because there's a lot of synergy there.
Yes, there is. So I got everything I wanted, and I'm a firm believer in flow state, which we can talk more about in a minute too. This goes back to the choking things into existence, and my childhood, all CPTSD, all of the things. I believe when things are really hard, especially in our professional and creative pursuits. And I also want to put, especially when you have the privilege of pursuing these sorts of endeavors, because not everybody does. The luxury of getting to explore your own drive as an entrepreneur, it takes courage, it takes grit and resilience, but it also takes a lot of humility. And when things are hard, what I've found in my own journey and professional trajectory, as well as all of the different clients I work with, when it's very, very difficult all of the time, something is off. And I don't want to say it's not meant to be, because there's always lessons there, but nothing about my fashion career, from choosing it at 22 to leaving it at 35, none of it was easy. It never came naturally. It was always a fight. even when things were working, it never worked all the way. And though I had magical things happen in my career, I would get support, be that fiscal support. I'd win and have exposure, all of these things. I never got the sales. It never landed to flow state on the other end. And design is business. It's not a self-indulgent act. Even fine art, you don't get to be a fine artist if it doesn't sell and it doesn't collect. There is a transactional nature to creativity in a culture that's rooted in economic policy and procedure. And so, time and time again, when I would come up to the end where it needed to work and sell through, it never worked. So I literally watched myself build basically a glass castle. So it was beautiful. It was everything I thought I wanted, but it was a glass castle that was on sand. It just collapsed. And my opportunity before I left Project Runway was I went and was the fashion director at Pendleton Woolen Mills. They were trying to reboot their women's wear department, which was a great opportunity. It's a Western brand. It's rooted in millwork, and it could have been a dream job. Could have been, seemed like it. All of these, like what I thought it was supposed to be, controlling things. But there was, again, roadblocks. It wasn't what it was supposed to be. I couldn't get my work through sales divisions. They didn't want to change their whole strategy, which was happening in fashion a lot in the mid 2010s. And I found myself defending creativity and defending creative intuition in boardrooms over and over and over again. So that's hard to do in the face of big data. I mean, my entire professional career has been in the 2000s, and big data, sales metrics, what sold, a black turtleneck is always going to sell over an electric lime green one. And saying my gut says this is the right thing just doesn't work when you're fighting against big data. So I left and went back to get my MBA, thinking that I was doing it to go back into this field that didn't really want me, and it was always difficult. And when I came out the other end, I realized through people encouraging me, saying, please don't try to go back, we need you, over and over again, that the work that I really needed to do was build basically my own consulting firm where I work with creatives and use my business acumen and use not just the successes that I had both in-house and on my own, but also the failures to help us navigate what success is supposed to mean for us individually, what scale of business is right for us as individuals that want to create things, and then help people do that with as much intention and integrity as possible. And the second I opened my business, right after I graduated, I went to South by Southwest and presented my thesis. I came back, I opened my business, and it's been flow state ever since then. There's not been a difficult part of it.
What you just said will tie directly back into a lot of our discussion about plant medicines as a tool to let go. And I'm going to just begin that tie-in by saying, Gretchen, I can totally relate, and I'm sure a lot of audience members can too, to this idea you're on a professional trajectory that seems to have a lot of success, but it is just one knock after another. When I was a practicing attorney, I was escalating up the ladder of the organizations that I worked for consistently and at a high level, but it was always a nightmare. I was always getting beat up. I always felt abused. I always felt like I was somehow inadequate. And a friend of mine, much more spiritually and I think emotionally sophisticated than I was at the time, said, Scott, maybe you're on the wrong path. Well, duh. It took me another 10 years to figure that out. But she was totally right, but duh. And that goes into flow state. And are martial
Yes.
arts. One of my favorite activities when we did jujitsu, or when I did jujitsu with my friends, you and I have never actually rolled together. And for those of you who don't
No, we haven't.
know a lot about jujitsu, rolling is when you are involved in a coordinated practice sparring round. And with the right partner, I would close my eyes and they might close their
Mm,
eyes. And we would get into this place where it was really more like a dance. And I understood
yes.
where their limbs were moving, where their head was, where this was all going, how the conversation was happening without even looking at the person or verbally communicating. And it was almost like I was meditating. An hour could pass doing this. And it was like it was 5 minutes. That's flow state, when you're in that space
Yes, it
where the
is.
subconscious or the mind is gone and you're moving forward. Now, why is that so important? Because creativity. I found that after those rolling sessions, after I was in that flow state, my mind would be open to creative thinking in a way that it wasn't.
Mm,
Does this resonate to you at all? With regards to
yeah,
the, yeah,
absolutely.
and does it resonate particularly with regards to plant medicine in the least?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? The word that's coming to mind is trust.
Mm.
There's an element, you think of survival mode. Do you trust yourself when you're in that state? When you're like when we were climbing, like there was a part of me that I don't think had the trust because I was like putting on the costume, so to
Mm.
speak. And what you're talking about with the role, like there's a point when you're like, the flow state is such a trusting, it goes back to that, like you're naked, but you're not, it's not vulnerability in a bad way. It's like you're so open that you get to be in that flow state, which really does make me think of the plant medicine because when I was younger, I was very afraid of plant
Oh, really?
medicine. It scared, I mean, and drugs and intoxicants in any kind because they were so much a part of my
Mm.
trauma. They really scared me. So a part of my control was no, no, I don't want to do them. And the times that I did when I was younger were environmental. They were around people. They were in public spaces where it was awful. It was like
Mm.
not, it proved my beliefs
Mm-hmm.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't ready to trust them because I wanted to control that environment too. And that's not where the message is. The flow state of medicine work, in my opinion, is a part of that process when you're preparing to drop in is saying, I am medicine. You have called to me. I am listening and I am ready for you to take me wherever I'm supposed to go with you. But I've got my water. I've got my shaman or guide. I've got the blankie I need, like whatever it might be. Trusting the moment when I've been called to do it has allowed for that flow state to be in the space where I've been able to discover things while working with the medicine that I wouldn't have been able to do if I went in because knowing it was going to be hard and I was not going to want to go where it was going to go. And I'm going to fight it just like I was fighting everything else. Plant medicine is about release. It is not about fighting. Even if you're seeing hard shit, even if the messages are sorrowful or jarring or beautiful, you have to be ready for a reciprocal experience. And I'm all about reciprocity, and flow state is all about reciprocity. It makes me think of the rolling too,
Yeah.
right? That's give and take in a very even, respectful, deeply reverent space. And that, if you can bring that into your medicinal practice and journey, I just think you get to go deeper and learn so much more about yourself and what it means to be open to this kind of work.
When and how did the medicines call you, and what medicine decided to get that bullhorn and shoot it in your direction?
Yeah, well, okay. So this past year, I'd say 2022 was a very challenging and sometimes very difficult year. It was a year of more giving for
Mm-hmm.
me than taking, and that happens That's natural. It's a part of familial life, romantic life, professional life. It happens to all of us. I moved my mother out from Colorado to upstate New York where I live, and that was almost a shifting of the guards. I'm taking over a more matriarchal role in our family, which is beautiful and bananas. And my husband has always had severe depression. He has Lyme's disease, and that can be one of the more difficult parts of that disease. And last year, he had a very, very difficult bout at the same time as my mother coming, and I was just depleted by the end of the year. It was just a lot, and I could do it, but I was in a space where I knew I needed to start caring for myself in a different way. And I think self-care, that can be a contrite term and mean a bunch of things, but what it was my cup went from runnething over to being rather empty. And I, out of the blue, right after the new year, looked at Kripalu, which is a yoga and maybe more alternative retreat and school in Massachusetts. And they had a course for a week at the end of January that I can't even remember what it was called. It called me. And I was like, I'm signing up for it and I'm getting the heck out of here. And I was there for 5 days. And you can silent meditate. The course that I was working on was like really about plant medicine, and internal family systems is a type of therapy where you get to know your parts. And these parts are formed during your whole life, but especially during youth. And I didn't really know what I was getting into, but it was exactly what I needed. And in that room, I found my new therapist and I found my medicine guide. And 4 weeks later, I started therapy. And my therapist is, she is a shaman, and she works herself with plant medicines. And my guide specifically works with MDMA and psilocybin. And funnily enough, I have to be honest, I still wanted to control the situation. So instead of doing a blend, I ended up doing just MDMA because of the work that not I had been doing, but the research I had been doing about the beautiful, beautiful work that MDMA does for complex trauma patients. And my childhood and then Project Runway were kind of almost the same experiences. Wow. Coming back, Saturn Return, if you know what Saturn Return was, I went on Project Runway going right into Saturn Return. And I went through a very similar experience. So I was like, I really am interested in MDMA. I feel like it might help me heart open, but I was still scared of the visuals. So I said no to the psilocybin work, but now that is what's calling me. So that was my first journey. That was in April of 2023. And then I did some LSD work this summer. And I don't know if that's one that you guys explore very much, but that one deepened my self-understanding. I did that self-guided, which I don't know if I'd recommend unless it's telling you to do it that way. And it was telling me to do it that way. And that was there to tell me that I was malnourished because I was not nourishing myself, because my belief systems were still that I cannot be nourished. And I had to do that on my own because I did not have my water and I did not plan accordingly and I did not have my snacks. And it smacked me in the face that as a 42-year-old woman, I have to get on it if I'm going to start really caring for myself.
Let's talk about both of those experiences separately. Okay. MDMA, Before we go into that, I am gathering from what you said that, and I just want to be 100% clear, that you worked with a guide, and I assume that that's because,
Yes.
as we all know, with any of these substances, there are potential risks. Talk to us a little bit about your preparation. Talk to us a
Yeah.
little bit, if you are comfortable sharing, about the experience. Share a little bit about the integration and what direct outcomes that had for you. Then we're going to talk about LSD separately. I'm
Yes.
quite interested to discuss that.
So, one of the things through all of the self work that I've done is I've been getting better at trusting myself and just what thoughts come to mind. I think when we think of like what we're called to, people think it's going to be like a lightning strike or things like that. And what I found, it's sometimes just even my self talk. And I was called to work with a woman. In the past, I've been called to work with male therapists. It really depends. And I think it's about like, how are we trying to my older people, younger people? You just don't know. So I was called to work with this woman. And what I found was just asking her was a part of the flow state. Like, oh, that's my gal. I'm going to ask if she's taking clients. I'm going to ask what types of work or medicine she works with. I'm going to ask when her availability is and if she would be open to working with me. And all of it was yes, 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 yes. And she worked with the modalities that I was looking for. She didn't show, she was not what I thought she was going to be. I just knew she was the one. And that's again the control thing of, like I wasn't looking for a white caftan, big amethyst wearing older woman. Like that's not what I didn't know that. I just knew I needed feminine energy and that they would show up. And all of that, yes, kept happening. When I walked into her space, I knew it was the right space. When I came with the things that I needed, she was like, no, I've never had anybody come with bubbly water and coconut water. Those were the things I needed. And it was yes, not no's. And I needed somebody who was going to put some boundaries around what the experience was going to be like. And also be open to my boundaries, because there are people that'll be like, no, you have to work with psilocybin or you have to do it my way. And what you want is, again, that you want the relationship, you want the role. And that was what I got from her. And it allowed me to go into just MDMA because that's where I was on my path, in an environment that was right for me. And her one thing was, if you want to get up and process while working with the medicine, that's the hard stop. You need to be with the medicine. And her job was to make sure I was safe if I needed, that I was drinking water, if I was hot or cold, if I needed to go to the bathroom, and to stay with the medicine. So if there was something that was calling me or like stopping me from continuing the work, I could say, could you please write this down? But she wouldn't process with me right then, because that's the integrative work that comes next. And the magic of that was that it allowed me to say, thank you, message. Thank you, message. I hear you loud and clear. Take note and then drop back in. And it would truly, the medicine would trust me and let go. And then we would keep going.
Phenomenal. You said that LSD called you. Talk to me a little bit about that. Did you like wake up one morning and all of a sudden LSD was saying, please, Gretchen, or was it
Yeah,
else
totally.
that
I mean, that
there?
one's a little bit more wild. I know it's more challenging to work with and find and all of that stuff. My roots in Colorado give me the opportunity to access quite a bit of things if I need to. And yeah,
right?
And my sister brought it for my 40th birthday a couple of years ago, but she hid it and she didn't tell me about it. So I didn't even know it was there. And 9-10 months later, she just pinged and was like, did you ever find your actual birthday present? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she let me know what had transpired. And I didn't go searching for it, actually. It was interesting. It wasn't like, oh, God, I've got to go find it, because it's not really something that I've ever been called to do. So it's just like, okay, well, that'll be a fun thing to find when it is meant to be found. And maybe 2 months later, it was in the spring. It wasn't exactly the same time that I did my journey work with MDMA, but I just happened to find it in the freezer, maybe in May. So I knew it was there.
Oh.
I said hello to it. Like to think of myself as I'm woo woo, but I'm a pragmatist at the same time. So I'm like a very grounded, new age kind of person. So I said hello to it and was like, thank you for coming, um, and just left it there. And then this summer, after doing the work, after a lot of integrative work post MDMA and continuing my work with my therapist, I kept having these calls that I needed. It was saying, you need to do me and you need to do me alone. And at first I was like, that sounds crazy. But then it just kept happening. And 1 week out of the blue in August, I was like, this is the week. And I'm not going to tell my husband. I'm not going to tell my mother, who both live here. My husband was in the city for work. My mom was working at her cute little job. And I just called my sister and said, I need you to be my guide, but I don't want you to be very engaged. I just need you to check on me every couple of hours and just make sure I'm alive in whatever sense that means. And she said, no problem. And I went on this experience that was so much deeper than I would have been able to do without doing the MDMA. And it really, really brought me into deep belief work and childhood healing work around how many of the beliefs I have that hold me back now, which is more pleasure and joy. Like that's back to that. That's really what's bringing me to this work right now. Is this is not a very joyful, pleasure filled space. And pleasure can mean anything from sexual pleasure, personal pleasure, professional pride and joy, to presence. I just have been like, I want to dance. I want to laugh more. I want to live in a more embodied state of being Gretchen without always being concerned about my safety. And the LSD in particular, the MDMA taught me a lot about my achiever ambition state, which was really about putting me on a pedestal away from people. An achiever is a state of removal for me.
Wow.
Yeah. And LSD was about lightening the load, lighten up. I had lighten up, whatever, and who cares were my big messages from LSD in the best ways. And MDMA was get off the pedestal, get out of the tower.
So there is a narrative journey here. I have to say, on the subject of being called to things, there is a fascinating episode that we published a little while ago with a guest by the name of Sophia Dag. For those who are looking, the episode is about how ayahuasca helped this particular guest deal with the trauma of the loss of an unborn child. And there's a powerful story about a random trip that she took on a beach, I believe it's in Costa Rica, where she was called to the exact ceremony that she needed. Literally, it's the exact ceremony. It's very startling. And so I understand. I also will use this as a moment to say that you're pointing to a lot of things that we at Webdelics want to make sure that we emphasize over and over, which is that, we're not making any endorsements as to any particular approaches to how we deal with any substances, nor are we making endorsements or suggestions or providing medical advice about how or when or under what circumstances we use you as a listener or a viewer might deal with or use any of these substances, nor are we recommending that things occur without the appropriate medical or therapeutic supervision. With that in mind, though, everything that you've just said leads directly into then the discovery that you have helped enlighten me, and I bet many guests as to, which is how plant medicines helped you learn to let go. And I would love to hear how it feels having learned to
Oh
let go,
man, I feel like
Gretchen?
I'm just at the beginning of it, but you know how they say you can't really learn the lesson when people tell you, "Oh, let go, let go, let go," or like whatever it is. You're not
Mm-hmm.
going to do it until you hear it. And the timing, it's just been such a beautiful, I feel like moving into my middle age, though I know it's still early middle age. So much of this time is let go of performative expression, let go of like nobody cares as much as we think they care, is like an external expression of that. Let go for me has really, what it's doing for me is it's allowing my sense of humor to show me how much bigger it is. It's
Mm.
letting me be more radically transparent in terms of my failures, my fears, my doubts, and that those are superpowered. Being radically transparent about not being perfect, or like perfect as a survival mechanism and a presentation of I'm okay, I've got this, really is a blockage from meaningful, deep connection, be that with myself, my partner, my mother, my community.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found, I'm still discovering what that feels like, but what I'm getting is feedback from my clients, my mom, my husband, my friends, that's there has been a shift and that I'm more in my body
Wow.
and I'm looser. Like it's let go is like, this is a hard way to learn, Oop, did I lose you again? No,
Yeah.
you're there.
Mm. I very much am.
It's a more play. I am finding myself to be in a more playful, laughter oriented, present state more often. That's the real thing right now.
What a beautiful way to live, particularly as one moves into a different life phase. Two things come to mind that look, everything that you said really spoke to me. This idea of living in a more joyful, buoyant space reminds me of an episode that's going to come up involving or with a guest by the name of Randall Hansen, who talks about how psychedelics can help you bring out your inner
Mm,
child. And then the subject of middle age, that is a significant and scary landmark for a lot of people. And you see folks, celebrities come to mind that do all sorts of things to mask this or run from it. There is an episode that we're going to be featuring quite soon with a guest by the name of Sheila Pearl, who started her plant medicine journeys at age
yes.
79. Now at age 82, yeah, exactly.
Get
I'm like, you go, girl.
it.
And at 82, she's saying she's not afraid of her aging body anymore. She's
Let it
let it
go. Let it
go.
go. If you let it go, there's just so much more to discover. Why hold on? I feel like the holding on really limits possibility in whatever way you want to think about
Which,
that.
well, but then that goes as to the other theme of yours that has been consistent throughout this episode, which has been creativity. Because if you're able to let go, I can only imagine then the expansiveness of creativity suddenly is available in a way that it can't be. I could only imagine if you're holding close and not opening them. My creativity is inherently about opening of the
Absolutely.
mind.
Absolutely. I mean, to be in a more embodied space and open, I've been shocked at what has come through and how quickly. Um, I'm a big believer in manifestation, but from a place of self actualization. It's more about like, I love the saying, I think this is from the way people say, they all think it's somebody else has said this or the originator of this phrase. So I'll leave you all to think about who it might be. The target draws forth the arrow. Since starting my
Wow.
practice, that was great. It felt like it's part of my life's work. It's not all of my life's work. Life is so long, but I have had no idea what was going to happen next. And part of it was still that survival mode of like, this, I'm good at this. It is flow
Mhm.
state. I'm going to keep doing this. But from what happened with the pandemic, to the jarring cultural shifts we've gone through in the last 5-10 years. What's next was very blocked for me. And like you're saying, the letting go, the creativity that's flown, I've come into new expanded expressions of the work that I want to do and how I want to engage in society as a human being, let alone as an advisor the way I am, that would have never happened without this work. And it's because I'm open, I'm not closed.
I love it. There is one final thread that I'm not going to let go. As usual, you dropped a little nugget, you let it roll to the side of the road, and I've had to stop and think about this, and now I'm going to walk back and pick it up. You said you've been doing some Venus and Isis work. A lot of our audience members may not understand what that means, what that is. They may have grown up or be practicing in more traditional religious faiths. They may be thinking, okay, are you worshiping gods that don't even exist? Right, all that sort of thing. But I will, before you answer that question, say to you an interesting thing that happened recently, which is that within a conversation with a shaman that I recently had, he said to me the following: there are levels of operations of operation in the universe. The first is the physical, the tactile, the things that we touch or feel or see. Beneath that is the intellectual. Beneath that is the emotional. Beneath that is the spiritual. And undergirding the spiritual is the mythic.
I love that.
I knew that would shake you up a little bit. Shake us up by explaining exactly what this sort of work is.
So, dare I say my therapist one more time? I was talking to her specifically about my trauma from Project Runway and how that relates to my childhood work. And she was like, she brought up hubris. She was like, well, it sounds like you maybe weren't exactly who you thought you were going through that environment. You were in such a protected state. Maybe you were harder to handle than you thought, or maybe you were so guarded you were cold. And she was like, have you ever heard of Inanna? And I was like, no, I haven't heard of Inanna. And Inanna, Isis, and Venus are kind of different versions of the same goddess. And as she was saying this, I had a vision of when I met her at Kripalu. She did a sound meditation, which is great. If anybody's not done any sound bathing, it's a really lovely, healing, centering experience. She was taking us through this meditation. And I kept having this vision. I'm laying down of roots coming out of my body and me being pulled into the earth. And Isis, Inanna, and Venus, there's a part of the mythic stories of them where some of them have more arrogance or hubris than others, but they all have to go to the underworld for a part of their lived experience or their cyclical journey. And Inanna, very specifically, her sister lives in the underworld, and she feels called to go see her sister. And so she's getting ready. She's got her armor. She's got all, like, so many layers of armor on. And her sister knows she's coming. And she tells all of her, underworld demons and beasts and guards to set at every threshold, take one of her pieces of armor away. Because she's got like something, she has beef with her. I'm still learning about Inanna. There's like the message, they have some stuff to go through. So by the time Inanna gets to her, she's naked. And she has to be there with her as her real self, not as this self. And the minute she said that, I was like, excuse my French, oh, fuck. Because we have to be vulnerable to be able to see ourselves and open and let go and become deeper, more enriched, more vibrant, tender, loving, empathetic, joyful, sincere, authentic versions of ourselves. And that, I believe, is literally the journey work I'm on right now. It's a very mythic, and those myths, believe them or not, they're parts of stories that help us better understand how connected and how universal these things are. And that's a part of the medicine work too, is it helps you feel both big and small all at the same time. And that to me really is the letting go.
And on the subject of myths, Gretchen, I have to say, this conversation has been epic. If there is one takeaway that I can pull from everything that you've said, letting go can truly transform the way that we live and open up possibilities in a sense, and with a power that sheer drive and pile driving one's way through life can't. And that plant medicines can be a way to do that in a way that is tied to our most deeply held essences and to the full scope of possibilities that are within each of us. And you're living proof of that. Gretchen, if there's one takeaway that you would like to share with people before they go, whether it is, whether it's something that you've said already or something new that you want to add, I'm sure everyone would love to hear it.
I think the most important thing is if you're already working with some medicines or are curious, that there is a message in that. Be open to that. Don't limit possibility and stay curious. The best thing that's ever happened to me is to remind myself, to learn that reminding myself to remain curious and open is the better way to be. And if your part of your discovery process is plant medicine, do the work, do it with integrity, be open to possibility, ask for what you need and what you're looking for, and stay curious.
I absolutely love it. Gretchen, there is no way on earth or in the underworld or in the heavens above, depending on what god or goddess you're studying, that people are not going to have listened to this without becoming curious about how they can find out more about you. Where can they do that?
They can do that. So this probably will make sense after this interview. My business is called Weird Specialty.
I love it.
Because I am one, and so are all of the people I work with. So you can go to weirdspecialty.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Weird Specialty. And this next couple of weeks, there's going to be a lot of new launches and announcements and offerings and ways of engaging with me that are all based in what I have been learning through the plants. So please get at me. I would love to answer any questions or be of service in any way I can to anybody who's a part of this journey.
Service is what it's all about. Thank you for that. For those of you who have enjoyed this episode, and I am sure that is everyone who's listened to or watched it, stay tuned to the Webdelics podcast because we have a load of fascinating interviews coming up. Everything from discussions about how you can use plant medicines to stop being a toxic boss to plant medicine as a way to enhance your yoga practice. It is an amazing series, and I cannot wait for everyone to deepen their knowledge and understanding of these substances. Take away everything that you've learned today, build on it, and continue to engage. And on the subject of continued engagement, if you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to tell everyone that you know about what we're doing, and subscribe to the Webdelics podcast on your favorite audio platform or on YouTube. We'd really, really love it if you left us a 5-star review on your favorite audio platform or left some remarks on the YouTube channel too. We always want to hear what folks are thinking. And then once you've done all of that, be sure to go to our website at webdelics.com. That's WEBDELICS.com. Sign up to our blog and read all that you can about a whole host of subjects related to plant medicines and psychedelics. And that information is curated, credible, and objective. Don't forget to check out our various social media sites on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. And then, above all else, be sure to come back next time for another episode of the Webdelics podcast.